Good day everyone, so we are going to be diving into a bit of Kokomi lore in this video, so there's no gameplay, and if that's not your cup of tea, you're welcome to click off. But other than that, do stay around and do sort of enjoy the discussions. Yes, my entire channel is dedicated to Kokomi, so let us dig into her lore, her story, and remind ourselves as to why we like this character so much. And obviously, I'm not just going to read these stories. I think what we'll do is we'll go through each one of these sections, but we'll go through it, we'll go over them with regards to one key question. And I think this will be something that I'm keen to hear you guys' input as well. And that is, how old is Kokomi? Now, I estimate her to be between 22 and 24 years old. I do consider her to be waifu material, and I do think there's enough reason and like evidence to sort of at least suspect that she is older than 18 by quite a fair margin. And this is what we'll sort of dig into. Obviously, the point here is not to be contentious, but to sort of use this question, how old is she, in reference to discussing a bit of the history of Kokomi. And to discuss that history, let's talk a bit about how long has she been ruling on Watatsumi Island? How long has she been the Divine Priestess? So when we click here on the Vision tab, you can see here that when the Vision Hunt decree came out under the story, Kokomi led her people in raising the banner of resistance. Now, if you follow the in-game lore, the traveler went to Inazuma roughly about 1 year after the Shogun or Raiden sort of declared the Vision Hunt decree. In other words, we know from a lore perspective that Kokomi has at least been ruling Watatsumi Island for 1 year, and that is quite interesting. Now, for her to lead her people into war requires her to be really exceptional. I mean, it's something that a lot of people take for granted, but I wouldn't trust any old leader, and this is kind of important. So let's just talk a bit about the role of the Divine Priestess. So if you click here on Secret Notes, it sort of says here that the Divine Priestess's role is one of utmost importance to Watatsumi Islands, to the point that the people's eyes are always upon whoever the Divine Priestess is. Her every move, like whatever Kokomi or whoever Divine Priestess at that point is, whatever she likes, everyone else will like. Whatever she dislikes, everyone else will keep their distance from. So you can see here that it's even like Kokomi's own mother says, as the ruler is, so shall the people be. That being Divine Priestess is not a small thing. It's not just oh, I'm the Kujo Sara of the whatever. It literally means she is the ruler. She is like almost and I want to put this in air quotes, like the demigod. She's almost like this holy figure for the people of Watatsumi Island. And this is very important, because you don't just get to be Divine Priestess. And this is what I sort of say in or in Character Story 1. When Kokomi ascended to her role, a lot of people sort of came to see her. A lot of people were surprised. There was lots of suspicion, there was lots of confusion, there were people even chuckling. In other words, people that thought, well, this isn't serious. And you can see here, a lot of people thought that, she was overly young in appearance in their eyes, and this means not in terms of how she looked, in terms of the fact that they thought she wasn't mature enough to rule. That is kind of the sort of vibe I'm getting here. And you can see it that people were even planning sort of plots to sort of like usurp Kokomi. There were ambitious plans to sort of get rid of her. And yeah, there was a storm approaching. But what did Kokomi do? Well, she won over the hearts of all the people. Now, let's just think again logically about this. There is a Vision Hunt decree. So what happened? Well, a week before that, Kokomi won all the hearts of people and went to war, right? Well, no. You don't just win an entire island nation's hearts and then the next week take them into war. In fact, what you'd argue is that Kokomi spent at least about the bare minimum 6 months gaining the trust of her people before actually leading them into war. So I would argue very conservatively that since the day that she was ascending into her role as Divine Priestess, she must have at least been ruling like Watatsumi Island from that day for about 2 years, to the point that we've met her now in game. So this is very important, because a lot of people don't seem to understand this. I am not going to go to war. I'm not going to send, click here, click on this tile, send free warriors, whatever. It's not a game. When I send people to war, what I'm saying is, look, you are a father. You might not come back to your child and to your wife. That is the seriousness of this. You are prepared to die. You must be prepared to suffer. In fact, we know from the Onkonomia event, we know from the sort of lore and storytelling that Kokomi was also one of the people that attended to the wounded soldiers. So this character had to see people literally being ripped, the flesh ripped from them, and had to go and mend that. She had to see the real tragedy of war from a very brutal perspective, from the perspective of people suffering, from people not having enough food, as we discovered during our story quest with Kokomi and so on. In other words, this is something that you wouldn't say a 14-year-old can mentally just take in and still be sane. This is something that you would at least be of 20 years old to sort of properly handle, like when it comes to from a maturity perspective. And not only that, the role of divine priestess, I think if you look here in the vision hunt here as well, after the war and stuff's over, was also one where Kokomi directed her energies towards governance and economics. And I think even in one of the character stories, it says that Kokomi, being the divine priestess, is not like a very simple thing. It is something where she is literally ruling over all of the governmental affairs of Watatsumi Island. So not only is she ruling the entire logistics of the island and making sure the island's running, she's also sort of directing the war. She's writing a thick book of directives, and you don't just write a thick book of directives in just a month or two. That is at least a couple of months of work, and to make sure it's all logical and so on, and then you entrust it to your soldier Goro and so on. So the amount of responsibility that is on Kokomi's shoulders, the amount of things that she had to do, the fact that she had to be uncomfortable and be shy when speaking in public, where she's like literally shaking, where it's said in one of these characters' sort of stories and so on. This is so much pressure on one character, to the point that I cannot believe that she is 14 or 16 years old when doing all of this. There is no real life female girl that can go through all of this and still sort of lead an entire rebellion against the shogunate at that age. So for me, logically speaking, Kokomi must have at least been ruling for about 2 to 3 years. She must have gained a lot of trust from her people in order to just have them be like comfortable having her send them to war and so on. So for me, the entirety of Kokomi and her strategist and all the things that she does speaks volumes to the fact that she's way more mature than we give her credit for. And as such, I do think that maturity reflects on the fact that she must be where we currently are at in her 20s in order to be able to do all of this. So from my perspective, looking at just the sheer amount that this lady has accomplished and so on, it is absolutely incredible. So from a lore perspective, I do rate her very, very high. In fact, even stuff like where she sets up an energy system of measurement for herself. This is not this level of almost like self-introspection and self-awareness is not something you really develop at the age of 18 or 19. So typically what I've seen when working with teenagers, because for those of you who didn't know, I've spent years actually teaching people high school maths and then university maths and so on. But from what I've seen with teenagers and so on, a lot of their identities and so on still runs like as comes from like where their place is in a group and so forth. And what you could see here with Kokomi is that she's transcended well even beyond that, to the point that she's setting up a system to take care of her own self. Like, that is not something you typically see from someone that's aged 16, 17, 18. That's a level of self-reflection and awareness that goes quite beyond that. Meanwhile, whilst doing all of her other duties, mind you. So this is very, very crucial. It shows you that she herself is mature. She's even like intellectual enough to butt heads with Yamiko, as we saw, and sort of call her out on her nonsense. Like Yamiko said, she looks as cute as a jellyfish, but her words sting like one as well. So we know she's also not just a pushover, and this is not an amount of character development that any person under the age of 18 can just have. It is something that really takes years and years. So for me, Kokomi is very much a mature character. And I also think if we just look at the aesthetics of Kokomi, she's obviously got quite a revealing outfit, if we're quite honest. So Genshin Impact is not afraid, so you can see here with Yelan, to create clothing or sort of effects that accentuates some of the assets of their more like mature female characters. It's the same with Shenhe, and sort of the openness here on her hips. Look at how wide her hips are. It's incredible. But I mean, even with Kokomi, you can see, I mean, I can absolutely have a good view of all of the aspects of Kokomi, and I'm not trying to show this to be funny and so on, but just to sort of tell you that I wouldn't be showing off all of this, making it so obvious, if this character were under 18. I mean, that would just be very, very bad taste. And even if you say, well, look, hold on, objection, what about how Fischl looks? Fischl is currently age 16. Look at how much she's revealing and so on. Well, given everything we've said up until right now, Kokomi cannot be 16 years old, because that would mean she would have to ascend into the role of the Divine Priestess at the age of 14 or 13. And given how important literally leading an entire island nation is, you wouldn't do that. You would, as we'd always say, come of age. So you would be like, let's say, 18 years old. You'd now sort of take up your role as Divine Priestess. You're now an adult. You're now ready to sort of start taking the realm over. And then after 3 or 4 years, you've led your people. There's a big war. You lead them into war. And that's sort of more or less how I see Kokomi. So from a design perspective, from a lore perspective, and from what we can see in game, this character for me is she's a brilliant tactician and so on, but she's also very, very mature and very responsible. And that answers, I think, for me at least, the question of age, but it also gives me a sort of an appreciation for whom this character is. So, for instance, Ayaka, I think it's pretty uncontentious to say that she's at least 18 and so on. And Kokomi has way more maturity than Ayaka does. Ayaka obviously leads the cultural festivals, so she's quite involved in doing a lot of work. So Ayaka is obviously a hard worker and so on, but the level of maturity that Kokomi has compared to Ayaka is quite a bit more. And I honestly would argue that it'd be very incongruent for the younger character to be so much more in terms of like lore-wise than the older characters. So for me at least, if you want my honest opinion, I think Ayaka is probably like 20, 21 years old, and I do think Kokomi is slightly older with way more life experience than Ayaka. And that sort of speaks just to the differences between the characters. Obviously, they've got like, you can see in terms of model height, they're like more or less like the same height. And then obviously the slightly taller, and I do mean slightly taller female model is also for the other characters like Yelan and Shenhe. So yeah, guys, that's been a sort of bit of a dive and analysis into Kokomi. We can go into stuff like her hobbies and so on, but that'll probably be for a next video. Let me know what you think, and yeah, happy Kokomi, whatever that means. And here we go. Let's just bomb down.